Picture this. You discover your husband is stealing millions and planning to disappear tomorrow morning, leaving you pregnant and penniless to face the FBI alone. You confront him, and he tries to murder you. Claire Anderson died on her kitchen floor. 4 minutes without a heartbeat. 4 minutes while her baby kicked frantically inside her. 4 minutes that exposed secrets worth killing for. But death couldn't stop her. And neither could her husband's wealthy family, their lawyers, or their lies. This is the story of a woman who came back from death to fight for justice. Smash that like button, comment below, share with friends, and subscribe so you never miss these incredible true stories. Here we go. 4 minutes. That's how long was dead on my kitchen floor. 4 minutes while my husband watched. 4 minutes while my unborn daughter kicked frantically inside me. 4 minutes that exposed 5 years of perfect lies. My name is Claire Anderson, and this is the story of how I died and came back to destroy the man who killed me. It started 6 years ago at a charity gala in Manhattan. I was 23, fresh out of nursing school, wearing a borrowed dress that didn't quite fit right and feeling completely out of place among the designer gowns and champagne flutes. My best friend Jenna had dragged me there, insisting I needed to celebrate finishing my boards. I'd spent the previous 72 hours studying until my eyes burned, and all I wanted was to collapse into bed. Instead, I found myself standing awkwardly by the silent auction table, pretending to be fascinated by a weekend spa package I could never afford. That's when Brandon Carter found me. He was everything I thought I wanted. 6 feet 2 inches tall, handsome in that classic American way with sandy brown hair and blue eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He wore his tuxedo like he was born in it, moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted his place in the world. He was 30, a successful investment banker at one of Manhattan's most prestigious firms, and when he approached me with 2 glasses of sparkling water, he'd noticed I wasn't drinking. I felt my stomach flip. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he said, handing me a glass. His smile was warm, genuine, without a trace of the arrogance I'd expected from someone who looked like him. "That obvious?" I laughed nervously. My friend insisted I come. "I'm not really the gala type." "Neither am I, honestly. My firm bought a table and I pulled the short straw." He gestured to the crowd. "But I'm glad I came. What's your name?" "Claire. Claire Anderson." "Brandon Carter? What do you do?" "Claire Anderson." "I'm a nurse. Just finished my licensing exams. I start at Mount Sinai ICU next month." And then he did something that changed everything. He asked about my work. Really asked, leaning in like every word mattered, asking follow-up questions that showed he was actually listening. He wanted to know why I chose nursing, what drew me to intensive care, what I'd learned in school that surprised me. We talked for 2 hours straight, standing by that auction table while the gala swirled around us. He made me feel like the most interesting person in the room, like my dreams mattered, like I mattered. By the end of the night, he'd asked for my number. By the end of the month, we were inseparable. The courtship was a whirlwind romance straight out of a movie. Flowers delivered to the hospital on my first day of work, a dozen white roses with a card that said, "You're going to change lives today." Handwritten poetry slipped into my locker during night shifts, verses about how my dedication inspired him. Weekend trips to the Hamptons where we walked on empty beaches and he listened to me talk about my patience, my fears, my hopes. He introduced me to his family within weeks, his mother, Victoria, elegant and welcoming, hosting elaborate dinner parties where she made me feel like royalty. His father, Peter, a retired corporate lawyer, treating me with the kind of paternal warmth I'd been missing since my own father died. His younger sister, Holly, 26 to my 23, instantly becoming my confidant and friend. When Brandon proposed 8 months later at a ski resort in Aspen, getting down on one knee in the snow, with a ring that must have cost 3 months of my salary, I said yes before he finished the question. How could I not? He was perfect. We were perfect. This was the fairy tale I'd been promised as a little girl. The wedding was beautiful. Victoria planned everything: the venue, the flowers, the 7-tier cake, the string quartet, 200 guests, all carefully curated by the Carter family. My mother, Diane, sat in the front row crying happy tears, thrilled that her daughter had found such a good man after losing her father 5 years earlier. Jenna was my maid of honor, whispering, "You did it, Claire," as I walked down the aisle. I believed I had. The first year of marriage was everything I dreamed of. Brandon supported my grueling 12-hour shifts, bringing dinner to the hospital when I worked doubles, rubbing my feet after 13-hour days standing in the ICU. He bragged about me to his colleagues, introduced me as my wife, the ICU nurse who saves lives. We bought a beautiful brownstone in a nice neighborhood. Well, his family helped with the down payment, but it was ours. We talked about having children someday, about growing old together, about the life we'd build. But then came the suggestions. Small at first, so subtle I almost didn't notice them. You work so hard, baby. I make enough for both of us. Why don't you take some time off? Focus on yourself for once. I'd laughed, kissed him, said I loved my job, but he brought it up again. And again, always gently, always with concern in his voice. You came home crying yesterday after losing that patient. It's taking a toll on you. I hate seeing you suffer. Jenna seems like a bad influence. All she talks about is her divorce and how much she hates men. That's not healthy energy for you. My parents really need us for Thanksgiving this year. Your mom lives alone. She'll understand. But my parents have the whole family coming. It would hurt them if we didn't show up. Each suggestion felt reasonable in isolation. Caring, even. He worried about my stress levels, my emotional health, my relationships. He just wanted what was best for me. Right, but slowly, methodically, my world shrank. I cut back my hours at work, then cut them back more. Brandon's salary was substantial. We didn't need my income. He reminded me, and working part-time meant I had more energy for him, more time to attend his work functions, more bandwidth to be the wife he needed. My friends stopped calling after I canceled plans one too many times. Jenna tried hardest, showing up at the house unannounced, asking if I was okay. But Brandon was always there, always pleasant, always steering conversations away from anything too personal. Eventually, even Jenna gave up. Family holidays became obligations at the Carter estate. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter all spent with Brandon's family. When I suggested visiting my mother for her birthday, Brandon's face fell. Of course we can go, he said, sounding hurt. I just thought you'd want to spend it here. My parents have been planning this party for weeks, but if your mom is more important, I went to the Carter party. I always went to the Carter party. By year 3 of our marriage, I'd quit nursing entirely. Brandon celebrated with champagne and a weekend trip to Paris. Now you can finally relax, he said. Focus on us. Maybe start thinking about having a baby. I should have recognized the pattern. I was an ICU nurse. I'd treated domestic violence victims, seen the warning signs, knew the statistics. But it's different when you're inside it. When the cage builds one bar at a time, you don't realize you're trapped until it's too late. The first time Brandon hurt me physically, I was 26. We'd been married 3 years. I'd suggested visiting my mother for her birthday, just a day trip. Nothing major. Brandon was scrolling through his phone, barely listening. Sure, whatever, he muttered. Really, you don't mind? He looked up, irritation flashing across his face. I said sure, didn't I? Why do you always have to push? I'm not pushing, I just wanted to make sure. He grabbed my arm, hard. His fingers dug into my bicep with enough force that I gasped. For a moment, we both froze, staring at each other. Then he released me, horror dawning on his face. Claire, God, I'm so sorry. I don't know what came over me. Work has been so stressful, and I would never hurt you. You know that, right? He cried, actually cried, apologized over and over, brought me flowers the next day, was extra attentive for a week. The bruises on my arm faded from purple to yellow to green, hidden under long sleeves. I told myself it was a one-time thing. Stress, everyone has bad moments. But the incidents increased. A shove during an argument about his mother's intrusive visits. A plate thrown near my head that shattered against the wall when I suggested we couldn't afford another luxury vacation. Holes punched in walls when things didn't go his way, each time followed by apologies, flowers, promises. Each time I convinced myself it was the last time. The psychological abuse was worse than the physical. He had ways of making me doubt my own reality. I never said that. You're remembering wrong. You're being too sensitive. I was joking. If you just listen instead of always getting defensive. My mother's right. You have gotten paranoid since you stopped working. By the time I got pregnant at 28, I'd become an expert at explaining away bruises. Clumsy. I told my mother when she noticed marks on my wrist. Pregnancy brain. I laughed to the obstetrician when she asked about a fading black eye. I bumped into the counter. I said to Holly when she looked concerned about fingerprints on my forearm. The truth was, I was terrified. Terrified of leaving. Terrified of staying. Terrified of what Brandon would do if I told anyone the truth. I knew the statistics women who leave are at the highest risk of being killed. I'd seen it in the ICU. Women who came back worse each time, until finally they didn't come back at all. So I stayed. I played the perfect wife. I decorated the nursery in soft yellows and whites, buying tiny onesies and board books, preparing for a baby who would be born into a house full of secrets and fear. I attended prenatal classes alone, telling everyone Brandon was working, when the truth was he'd forbidden me from wasting money on classes for something women have done naturally for millennia. I rubbed my growing belly and whispered promises to my daughter that I'd keep her safe, even though I had no idea how, even though I could barely keep myself safe. I was 7 months pregnant when I found the laptop. March 15th, 9:47 p., the night that changed everything. Brandon was in the shower. I could hear the water running upstairs, could hear him humming something tuneless. He'd been in a good mood all evening, unusually cheerful, almost manic. He'd ordered my favorite Thai food for dinner, rubbed my swollen feet while we watched television, kissed my forehead and told me he loved me before heading upstairs to shower. I should have known something was wrong. Brandon was never that attentive anymore. His laptop sat open on the kitchen counter, screen glowing with an email that made my blood run cold. Wire transfer confirmation. $2.3 million. Cayman Islands account. Client funds labeled as investment redistribution. My hands shook as I scrolled through his inbox. Months of correspondence with an offshore bank. Detailed plans for establishing residency in Grand Cayman. A one-way plane ticket departing tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. from JFK. Only his name on the reservation. He was stealing. From his clients, from people who trusted him with their retirement funds, their children's college savings, their life's work. And he was planning to disappear. Without us. I pressed my hand against my belly, feeling my daughter's movements. 7 months of kicks and hiccups and tiny fists pressing against my ribs. 7 months of imagining her face, her fingers, the weight of her in my arms. 7 months of hoping that maybe becoming parents would change things, would bring back the man I'd married. He was going to leave us with nothing. Worse than nothing, he'd leave us to face the consequences of his crimes. The FBI would come looking for the missing money, and I'd be the wife of a wanted criminal. Penniless and pregnant and alone. I kept scrolling, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. There were more emails, communications with someone named Marcus about cleaning up loose ends, a discussion about making sure nothing traces back. And then I saw it, an email to his lawyer dated 2 weeks ago regarding divorce proceedings and asset protection strategy. He'd been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Planning to steal millions, disappear to a country with no extradition treaty, divorce me remotely, and leave me to deal with the fallout. The shower shut off upstairs. I should have run. Every instinct screamed at me to grab my purse, walk out that door, get to a police station or my mother's house or anywhere that wasn't here. But I was 7 months pregnant, exhausted, and terrified. Where would I run to? How would I explain any of this? Would anyone even believe me? And beneath the fear was something else. Anger. White hot, burning anger that after everything I'd endured, after giving up my career and my friends and my independence, after letting myself become a ghost in my own life, he was just going to leave me with nothing. So instead of running, I waited. Brandon came downstairs 10 minutes later in his bathrobe, hair damp, skin flushed from the hot shower. He was still humming, still in that unnaturally good mood. He looked like a man without a care in the world. He stopped when he saw me standing by the counter, his laptop between us like evidence at a crime scene. "Hey, baby, you okay? You look pale. Were you just going to disappear?" My voice came out steadier than I expected, fueled by that burning anger. "Leave me and our baby." For a moment, and his face went completely blank. No surprise, no denial, No emotion at all. Then something shifted, a mask sliding off to reveal something cold and calculating underneath. Something I'd caught glimpses of over the years but never fully seen until now. You were never supposed to find this. Those 7 words told me everything. Not denial, not explanation, not even anger at being caught. Just a flat acknowledgement that I'd discovered his secret, and that was a problem he needed to solve. Brandon, we can figure this out. There's nothing to figure out. His voice was emotionless, detached, like he was discussing a business transaction. I'm leaving tomorrow. You'll be fine. You can go back to your mother. She'll take care of you. Fine, you stole millions of dollars. When they figure it out, they'll come after me too. I'm your wife. They'll think I was involved. Then you should have minded your own business. He moved toward me, and something in his eyes made every instinct scream danger. This wasn't the man I'd married. This wasn't even the man who'd shoved me or grabbed me or punched walls. This was something else entirely, something primal and terrifying. I backed up against the counter, one hand protectively over my belly. Brandon, please, think about the baby. I am thinking about the baby. His hands came up to my throat. If you just stayed quiet, none of this would be happening. But you always have to push, don't you? Always have to dig where you don't belong. His fingers closed around my neck. Time does strange things when you're dying. The first 15 seconds were pure animal panic. I clawed at Brandon's hands, tried to scream, couldn't make a sound. My baby stopped kicking. She knew something was catastrophically wrong. I could feel her going still inside me, conserving oxygen, fighting to survive. 30 seconds. My vision started tunneling, darkness creeping in from the edges. I could see Brandon's face inches from mine, twisted with something between rage and determination and cold calculation. This wasn't a moment of passion. This wasn't a snap decision. He'd made a choice. He was willing to kill me to protect his secrets. I thought about all the times I'd made excuses for him, all the times I'd told myself it wasn't that bad. He didn't mean it. Things would get better. All the times I'd covered bruises and lied to my mother and pretended everything was fine. This was where it led. 45 seconds. I stopped fighting. Not because I gave up, but because my body wasn't responding anymore. My arms felt like they were made of lead, dropping uselessly to my sides. My legs wouldn't hold me. Brandon was supporting my full weight now, hands locked around my throat, choking the life out of me against the kitchen counter. I tried to say, I love you. No sound came out. I don't know if I meant it for him, or for our daughter, or for my mother who would have to identify my body. Maybe for all of them. Maybe for myself. 1 minute, I thought about our wedding day. Brandon crying during our vows, his voice breaking when he promised to cherish me in sickness and in health. I'd believed those tears. God help me. I'd believed every word. 1 minute, 15 seconds. My father's face flashed through my mind. He died when I was 18. A sudden heart attack while coaching Little League. One moment laughing, the next moment gone. My mother had never recovered. Not really. And now I was leaving her too. Leaving her to bury her only child. 1 minute, 30 seconds. I thought about Jenna, my best friend who'd tried so hard to reach me, who'd seen through Brandon's charm from the beginning, who'd asked me point blank if I was safe. I'd lied. I'd pushed her away. And now I'd never get to tell her she was right. 1 minute, 45 seconds. Everything started going gray at the edges, like old film footage fading. I couldn't feel my legs anymore. Couldn't feel my arms. Couldn't feel anything except the pressure on my throat and the absence of air and the terrible knowledge that my baby was dying with me. 2 minutes. I saw my life in fragments, disconnected moments flashing by. Nursing school graduation, my mother pinning on my badge with shaking hands. The night I met Brandon, thinking I'd found my happily ever after. Moving into this house, painting walls, dreaming about the life we'd build. The first time he hurt me. The confusion and fear and desperate hope that it was just a mistake. Every choice that had led me here. 2 minutes, 30 seconds. I thought about the nursery upstairs, yellow walls and white furniture, and a mobile with little clouds that I'd hung myself. A crib that would stay empty. Clothes that would never be worn. Books that would never be read. My daughter would never take a breath, never open her eyes, never know that her mother had tried, had fought, had loved her more than anything. 3 minutes. I couldn't see anymore. Everything was dark and quiet and distant, like I was sinking underwater, deeper and deeper. The surface growing farther away. I thought I heard Brandon's breathing, harsh and ragged, but I couldn't be sure. Maybe that was my imagination. Maybe I was already gone. 3 minutes, 30 seconds. Memories became dreamlike, abstract, colors without form, sounds without meaning. The boundaries between past and present dissolved. I was everywhere and nowhere. I was 23 meeting Brandon at the gala. I was 5 years old holding my father's hand. I was unborn myself, safe in my mother's womb, before the world could hurt me. 4 minutes. Everything went black. My heart stopped beating on my kitchen floor at 9:52 p.m. on March 15th. 7 months pregnant, strangled by the man who'd promised to love me forever, dead on the white tile floor we'd picked out together, beneath the pendant lights we'd chosen at Home Depot, surrounded by the life we'd built on lies. I didn't know that 62 seconds later, my neighbor Patricia Wilson would call 911 with shaking hands after watching through her kitchen window in absolute horror. I didn't know that Brandon would stage the scene, dragging my lifeless body to the staircase, arranging me at the bottom, calling emergency services himself with an Oscar-worthy performance of a panicked husband. I didn't know that paramedic Ryan Hayes would arrive 6 minutes later and immediately recognize strangulation marks despite Brandon's insistent story about a fall down the stairs. I didn't know that Ryan's partner Sarah Gomez would start CPR compressions while Ryan prepared the defibrillator, both of them refusing to give up even though I'd been down for over 4 minutes. I didn't know that 4 minutes and 17 seconds after my heart stopped, Sarah would get a faint pulse, and my eyes would flutter open to see Brandon's face through the ambulance window. I didn't know any of that. All I knew was darkness. And then, suddenly, violently, light. The first thing I saw was Brandon's face. He was standing outside the ambulance, backlit by the flashing red and blue lights of emergency vehicles, his expression carefully arranged into concern and panic. When our eyes met through the window, something flickered across his features, not relief, but calculation. Like he was already planning his next move. Then Ryan Hayes' face filled my vision, blocking out Brandon and the lights and everything else. "You're okay. You're back with us," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around us. His hands were on my shoulders, gentle but firm, anchoring me to reality. "Can you hear me? Blink. If you can hear me." I blinked. My throat felt like I'd swallowed broken glass dipped in acid. Every attempt to breathe sent shooting pain through my neck and chest. "Don't try to talk," Ryan said quickly, reading the panic in my eyes. "You've been hurt. Your throat is severely damaged. We're taking you to Mount Sinai right now. Do you understand?" I blinked again. My hands flew to my stomach. "The baby. Oh God. The baby. Your baby's moving," Ryan said, and the relief in his voice was palpable. "Heart rate's elevated, but she's fighting. Strong, just like her mom. Can you feel her?" I focused all my attention on my belly. There a small flutter. Then a stronger kick. My daughter was alive. We were both alive. Tears streamed down my face, hot and fast. Ryan took my hand, squeezed gently. "I'm Ryan Hayes. I'm a paramedic. My partner Sarah just saved your life. You were in cardiac arrest when we arrived. You're safe now. I promise you're safe." But I wasn't safe. Through the ambulance window, I could see Brandon ticketing to police officers, gesturing emphatically, playing the role of devastated husband. I tried to speak, to warn Ryan, but only a horrible rasping sound came out. "Shh, don't," Ryan said. "Save your strength. We're documenting everything." "Okay. The police are already here. They saw your injuries. Just focus on breathing." The ambulance ride was a blur of pain and terror and overwhelming relief that my daughter was still moving. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt Brandon's hands around my throat. Every time I opened them, I feared he'd somehow gotten into the ambulance with me. Sarah kept calling out, my vitals, blood pressure stabilizing, oxygen saturation improving, fetal heart rate 160 and holding. Medical terminology I understood from my nursing days, now applied to my own broken body. We arrived at Mount Sinai at 10:23 p.m. The emergency room team was waiting. I recognized some of them from when I'd worked there. Dr. Margaret Foster, one of the best ER physicians in the city, took one look at my neck and her expression hardened. "Get security outside this room immediately," she told a nurse, then gently touching my shoulder. "Claire, it's Margaret Foster. You probably don't remember me, but we worked together briefly when you were here. I need to examine you. I need to document your injuries. Do you understand?" I nodded, tears still streaming. Dr. Foster understood. She'd seen this before. She photographed my neck from every angle, her jaw tight with barely suppressed anger. She dictated her findings into a recorder, each word precise and damning. Bilateral petechial hemorrhaging in conjunctiva and sclera. Thyroid cartilage damage with significant swelling. Finger pattern bruising on anterior neck, consistent with manual strangulation. Ligature marks absent. These injuries are not consistent with a fall downstairs. This is assault by strangulation. Brandon tried to enter my room 3 times in the first hour. Security stopped him each time. Through the window in the door, I could see him playing the concerned husband, pacing, running his hands through his hair, accepting sympathy from nurses who didn't know what he'd done with. My mother arrived at midnight. Jenna must have called her. I learned later that the police had contacted Jenna as my emergency contact, since Brandon was the suspect. Mom took one look at my throat and collapsed into the chair beside my bed, gripping my hand like she could anchor me to life through sheer force of will. "My baby," she whispered, voice breaking. "My baby girl. I should have known. I should have pushed harder. I'm so sorry." I squeezed her hand. It wasn't her fault. It was never her fault. Detective Laura Bennett arrived at 1 a.m., 41 years old with sharp eyes and a soft voice. She specialized in domestic violence cases. She'd seen this before. She knew what strangulation meant. It was the #1 predictor that an abuser would eventually kill their victim. I couldn't speak, so she provided me with a notepad and pen. My hands shook so badly I could barely write, but I forced myself to form the words. "Brandon did this. He was going to leave us. He tried to kill me." Detective Bennett photographed my note, photographed my injuries again from different angles, asked me yes or no questions I could answer with head movements. "Has he hurt you before?" "Yes." "Did he threaten you tonight?" "Yes." "Did you lose consciousness?" "Yes." "Are you afraid of him?" "Yes." "Yes." "God?" "Yes." "Did anyone witness the attack?" I wrote neighbor, Patricia Wilson, next door now, kitchen window. Detective Bennett's eyes lit up. She saw it happen. "Yes, an eyewitness changed everything. It wasn't just my word against his anymore." At 3 a.m., Detective Bennett returned with news. An emergency protective order had been granted. Brandon was banned from the hospital, from contacting me, from coming within 500 feet. He'd been taken to the police station for questioning, for the first time in hours. I felt like I could breathe. Not physically, my throat was so swollen I could barely swallow, but emotionally. There was a barrier between us now, a legal barrier. I was safe. That feeling lasted exactly 72 hours. Brandon's arraignment happened on March 18th while I was still in the hospital, still unable to speak above a whisper, still terrified every time someone walked past my door. The charges were serious: attempted murder, assault with intent to kill, domestic violence with a deadly weapon. The prosecutor argued he was a flight risk. He had access to money, offshore accounts, a one-way ticket that had been scheduled for the day after he tried to kill me. The bail was set at $500,000. His family posted it in 2 hours. I watched the news from my hospital bed, my mother's hand clutching mine so hard it hurt, as Brandon Carter walked out of the courthouse, a free man, ankle monitor. Yes. Restrictions? Yes. But free. Free to walk on the same streets, breathe the same air, live his life while I lay in a hospital bed with his handprints still visible on my throat. "How?" I whispered, my voice barely functional. "How is this possible?" Detective Bennett sat in the chair on my other side, her expression grim. His family hired Patricia Vance, top criminal defense attorney in the state, $850 an hour. She argued he's not a flight risk because he turned himself in. He didn't turn himself in, he was arrested. Technically, he was questioned and released initially. He came back voluntarily with his lawyer. Vance spun that as cooperation. She argued he has deep community ties. His family has been in New York for generations. No prior criminal record. He tried to murder me. I know, Claire, but they're claiming you're unstable. They leaked your therapy records to the media. What those are sealed, those are from when I was 18. Should be sealed. But Vance has connections. Someone in the courthouse records department. We're investigating. But the damage is done. They're painting a picture of a troubled woman with a history of mental health issues making false accusations against a respected businessman. My mother stood abruptly, her face flushed with anger. Claire saw a therapist at 18 after her father dropped dead of a heart attack. That's grief counseling, not instability. That's a daughter processing trauma. I know, Diane, but they're using it, and they're just getting started. She was right. By the next morning, my face was all over social media. Someone had dug up photos from 3 years ago, me, at a charity event holding a wine glass, smiling, looking carefree and happy. The caption read, "Pregnant wife who accused husband caught drinking while expecting Claire Anderson's troubled past revealed." The comments were vicious. She's lying for attention. Gold digger trying to take him for everything. My friend knows her. She's always been unstable. Probably fell down drunk and is blaming her husband. Never mind that the photo was from before I was pregnant, before I even knew Brandon. The context didn't matter. The truth didn't matter. The narrative was set. People I'd never met were calling me a liar. Brandon's colleagues from the investment firm gave interviews defending his character. He's always been professional, kind, generous. This doesn't sound like the Brandon we know. They called me a gold digger, even though I'd had my own career before Brandon convinced me to quit. They called me a liar, even though I had strangulation marks photographed by multiple medical professionals. They called me crazy, even though my only mental health issue was grief counseling a decade ago. My character was being assassinated while I lay in a hospital bed, unable to defend myself, unable to speak above a whisper, watching my reputation destroyed in real time. Brandon's mother, Victoria, gave an interview to every major news outlet. She looked elegant and composed, the perfect picture of a concerned mother defending her son. Tears glistened in her eyes as she spoke. Brandon would never hurt anyone. He's the gentlest soul I know. Claire has had difficulties with reality since we've known her. She's been paranoid, accusatory, pushing away everyone who tries to help her. We've tried to support her, get her the help she needs, but she refuses treatment. Now she's trying to destroy my son's life to cover her own instability. It breaks my heart. I watched that interview with my mother and Jenna, who'd arrived that morning and refused to leave my side. Jenna had always seen through Brandon's charm. She'd asked me point blank 2 years ago if I was safe, if I needed help. I'd lied, pushed her away, and now I was paying the price. She's good, Jenna said quietly, watching Victoria's performance. She's very good. She's protecting a monster, my mother said, her voice shaking with rage. And then the worst news came. Dr. Foster entered my room on day 5 with an expression that made my heart sink. "Claire, I need to talk to you about the baby." "What's wrong?" The words came out as a rasp. "She's in distress. Has been since the attack. Her heart rate keeps spiking 180, 190. We're monitoring closely, but I need to prepare you for the possibility of early delivery." "No." The word came out as a sob. "No, she needs more time. She's only 35 weeks. "I know, but right now she might have a better chance outside than inside. Your body is under tremendous stress. The trauma, the ongoing fear, your body's trying to heal from a near-fatal assault. It's all affecting the pregnancy. This is his fault." Tears streamed down my face, and even now, from outside these walls, he's still hurting her. My mother smoothed my hair back, her own face wet with tears. "She's a fighter, Claire, just like her mother. She's going to be okay." But I couldn't shake the feeling that Brandon was winning, even locked up for 72 hours. Even with an ankle monitor, even facing serious charges, he was still destroying us. At 2:17 a.m. on March 22nd, exactly 1 week after Brandon tried to kill me, my water broke. The contractions started immediately, hard and fast. The baby was coming, whether we were ready or not. Amelia Grace Anderson entered the world at 5:03 a.m. on March 22nd weighing 5 pounds, 4 ounces. She came out screaming a thin, reedy cry that was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. They let me hold her for exactly 5 seconds, long enough to see her face, scrunched and red and perfect, long enough to touch her hand, her fingers wrapping around mine with surprising strength, long enough to whisper, "I love you, I love you, I love you." Then they rushed her to the NICU, respiratory distress, underdeveloped lungs. She needed help breathing. I lay in the delivery room, empty and exhausted and terrified, listening to my daughter fight for her life down the hall. By 8 a.m., Brandon's lawyer had filed an emergency motion, demanding a paternity test, requesting parental rights, claiming he deserved to meet his daughter. "That's my daughter," the motion read. "My client has a constitutional right to be involved in her life. Ms. Anderson's false accusations should not prevent him from being a father." I held my phone with trembling, bloody hands. I'd torn my IV out in the delivery and texted Detective Bennett 5 words. "He's going to kill us both." The safe house was located in upstate New York, 2 hours from the city, at the end of a long private driveway surrounded by dense woods. It was provided by Ryan Hayes' father, Senator James Hayes, who'd made domestic violence advocacy his political platform after his own sister was murdered by her husband 20 years ago. "No one knows about this property," Senator Hayes assured me as we arrived under cover of darkness on March 25th. I'd been discharged from the hospital that morning, still weak, still in pain, my throat still bruised. "It's held by a private trust. No connection to my name. State-of-the-art security system. Cameras on every entrance, motion sensors. You're invisible here, Claire." The house was modest but comfortable. 3 bedrooms, a living room with blackout curtains, a kitchen stocked with 2 weeks' worth of supplies. My mother moved into 1 bedroom immediately, unpacking her suitcase with determined efficiency. Jenna took the 2nd bedroom, setting up her laptop so she could work remotely and stay with me. I had the master bedroom, where every 3 hours I had to pump breast milk for the baby I wasn't allowed to hold yet. Amelia was still in the NICU, fighting for every breath. The doctors wouldn't release her for at least 2 more weeks, maybe longer. They were cautiously optimistic her lungs were developing. Her weight was increasing, but she was still fragile, still vulnerable. I visited her every day under police escort, wearing different wigs each time, blonde, red, brunette, taking different routes, parking in different areas of the hospital garage. Detective Bennett coordinated everything, determined to keep me safe until trial. Every time I touched Amelia's tiny hand through the incubator, I whispered the same promise. "I'm going to keep you safe, whatever it takes. I promise, Mom." Ryan visited often, no longer just the paramedic who'd saved my life, but someone who understood the weight of what we were facing. He'd bring coffee, sit with me during late-night anxiety attacks, tell me stories about his childhood to distract me from the constant fear. My aunt's name was Caroline, he told me one evening. We were sitting in the safe house living room, my mother and Jenna asleep upstairs. She was 28 when her husband strangled her. She survived the first attack, got a restraining order, did everything right. He killed her 3 months later when she was leaving work. I'm sorry if I were pro. It shaped my whole family. My dad has spent his entire political career trying to change laws, close loopholes, protect victims. I became a paramedic because I wanted to save people. Caroline never got a second chance, but you did. And I'm going to make damn sure you stay alive. His intensity should have scared me, but instead it felt like safety, like someone finally understood that this wasn't over, that the danger hadn't passed just because Brandon had an ankle monitor. For 2 weeks, I actually started to believe we might be okay. Brandon's GPS showed him at his apartment every night. Detective Bennett called daily with updates. The prosecution was building a case, gathering evidence, preparing for trial. Patricia Wilson, my neighbor who'd witnessed the attack, was ready to testify. Mr. Foster had documented everything meticulously. Ryan's paramedic report was detailed and damning. We had a chance, a real chance. Then, at 2:07 a.m. on April 3rd, I woke to a sound outside my bedroom window. At first, I thought I'd dreamed it, but then I heard it again, footsteps in the grass. Slow, deliberate, circling the house. I lay frozen in bed, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. The security system hadn't triggered. No alarms, no alerts. But I knew what I heard. Oh, someone was out there. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and texted Detective Bennett. Someone's here. Outside, please help. Then I texted Ryan, I'm not crazy. Someone's circling the house. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Just listened to those footsteps moving around the perimeter of the house, pausing at each window like someone was checking, planning, memorizing. The police arrived in 12 minutes. I watched from my window as they searched the property with the flashlights. 2 officers with guns drawn, moving through the woods surrounding the house. They found nothing. No footprints, the ground was too dry. No disturbances in the woods. No evidence anyone had been there. The security system didn't trigger, one officer said, showing me the log on his phone. If someone had approached the house, we would have been alerted. Are you sure you didn't dream it? I know what I heard. You're under a lot of stress. New mother, recent trauma. Sometimes our minds play tricks. After they left, I sat in the kitchen with my mother and Jenna, all of us too scared to sleep. I believe you, Jenna said firmly. You're not crazy. But when I checked my phone the next morning, there was a text from an unknown number. Sleep well. My hands shook so badly I dropped the phone. Detective Bennett traced it within an hour. Burner phone, purchased with cash at a convenience store in Queens. Impossible to trace to an individual. Brandon's ankle monitor shows him at home all night. Detective Bennett said, frustration evident in every word. 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. He didn't leave his apartment. The GPS data is concrete. Then the GPS data is wrong. Or someone else sent that text. The implications hung in the air. Someone was helping him. Someone with access, with resources, with the ability to terrorize me while Brandon maintained his alibi. The next morning, Patricia Vance filed a motion. The ankle monitor had malfunctioned. She claimed a 4-hour window from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m. the night of April 3rd with no GPS data. Just a technical glitch. Happens all the time with these devices, Vance said smoothly in her court filing. Electronic monitoring is notoriously unreliable. Our client was home sleeping, as verified by his building's security cameras. The media pounced. Paranoid new mother seeing shadows. One headline read, unstable wife makes more wild accusations while husband produces alibi. Said another. Even some of the police officers started looking at me differently. With doubt, with pity. Like I was a victim, not of violence, but of my own mind. Only Detective Bennett, Ryan, my mother, and Jenna believed me. He's gaslighting you, Bennett said. Playing with you. Trying to make you look unstable before trial. He needs the jury to doubt you. It's working. Only if you let it. Stay strong. We're going to trial in 2 months. The truth will come out. But how do you fight someone who can somehow be in 2 places at once? Someone with unlimited money, top lawyers, and a family willing to do anything to protect him. The answer came from the last person I expected. Brandon's sister, Holly. Holly Carter showed up at the safe house on April 8th at 9 p.m. with a suitcase, mascara-streaked face, and an expression of absolute devastation. Security stopped her at the gate. She stood in the rain, holding up her hands, begging them to let her in. Please, I need to talk to Claire. I have evidence. Please. Detective Bennett was there within 20 minutes. After questioning Holly for an hour in her car, she finally brought her inside. Holly looked like she'd aged 10 years. Her designer clothes were rumpled, her hair unwashed, her eyes red from crying. She clutched a leather folder like it was the only thing keeping her upright. My family disowned me yesterday, she said, her voice hollow. When I told them I was coming here, my mother said I was dead to her. My father cut off my trust fund. But you need to know the truth. Claire, you need to know what they've been hiding. My mother stood protectively between us. If this is some kind of trick. It's not. Holly's voice broke. I swear it's not. I found something. In my mother's office. I wasn't supposed to see it. But I can't. I can't protect him anymore. I can't be part of this. She opened the folder with shaking hands and pulled out a police report. The paper was old, yellowed, dated 8 years ago. Emma Richardson, age 24, had reported being strangled by her boyfriend Brandon Carter after she discovered he'd been stealing from his fraternity's charity fund. The details made my blood run cold. The hand marks on her throat, documented in photographs. The 4-minute strangulation she'd been clinically dead for 3 minutes and 47 seconds. The calculated rage in his eyes when she confronted him about the theft. It was my story. 8 years earlier. Different woman, same pattern, same monster. What happened to her? I whispered. My mother paid her off. Holly pulled out more documents, bank records showing a wire transfer of $200,000. An NDA signed by Emma Richardson, agreeing never to speak about Brandon or the assault. Legal threats warning that if she violated the agreement, the Carter family would sue her into oblivion. The police chief was a family friend, Holly continued, tears streaming down her face. He made the report disappear, convinced Emma it would be her word against Brandon's, and our family had unlimited resources to destroy her. She took the money and moved across the country. Changed her name, disappeared. Jenna took the documents, reading through them with her divorce lawyer eyes. This is a pattern. This proves Brandon has done this before, that he's been violent toward women, that his family covers it up. There's more. Holly pulled out another set of papers, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold them. I started digging after I found the Emma Richardson file. I wanted to know if there were others, and I found information about my father's first wife, Brandon's biological mother. She laid out Army records, newspaper clippings, court documents. Her name was Janet Carter. She married my father 30 years ago when he was in the Army. There were 2 domestic violence calls, both of them buried by my grandfather, who was a decorated general with connections everywhere. Janet disappeared when Brandon was 2 years old. The official story is she abandoned the family, ran off with another man. But Detective Bennett prompted. But there was never a paper trail, no divorce filing, no evidence she went anywhere. She just vanished. And my father inherited her life insurance policy 6 months later after having her declared legally dead. The room fell silent. The implications were staggering. You're saying your father killed her, my mother said quietly. I'm saying she disappeared under suspicious circumstances, and my family covered it up, just like they covered up what Brandon did to Emma, just like they're trying to cover up what he did to Claire. Holly looked at me, her eyes pleading. It's a pattern, Claire, a violence against women, covered up by money and family connections, spanning 3 generations. My grandfather probably beat my grandmother. I found hospital records for accidental falls that were clearly domestic violence. My father probably killed Janet. Brandon tried to kill Emma. He tried to kill you. And if we don't stop him now, he'll do it again. I thought about Amelia in her NICU incubator, fighting for every breath because her father had tried to murder her before she was born. I thought about Emma Richardson, paid to disappear and keep silent. I thought about Janet Carter, missing for 30 years, probably buried somewhere, her family too frightened or paid off to ask questions. We need to find Emma, I said, my voice steady despite the fear coursing through me. If she testifies, if she tells her story, the jury will see the pattern. They'll understand this isn't a one-time thing. This is who Brandon is. Holly nodded. I have her contact information from the NDA files, her new name, her address in Oregon. I can reach out to her. Your family will never forgive you for this, Jenna said softly. I know. Fresh tears spilled down Holly's face. My mother called me a traitor. My father said I'm not his daughter anymore. But I can't protect a monster just because he's my brother. Not when I know what he's done. Not when there's a baby involved. I can't live with that. Detective Bennett was already on her phone, coordinating with the Oregon Police Department. If Emma agrees to testify, we need to get her protection immediately. If the Carter family finds out she's talking, we all knew what that meant. Finding Emma Richardson took 3 days of careful negotiation. She'd built a quiet life in Portland, teaching elementary school, married to a kind man who knew nothing about her past, trying to forget the girl she'd been when Brandon Carter nearly killed her. When Holly called her, Emma's first response was silence. Then, quietly, voice trembling, is he hurting someone else? He tried to kill his pregnant wife, Holly said, putting the phone on speaker so we could all hear. She survived. She's fighting back. She has a baby daughter now. But she needs help. We need you to tell your story. I can't. Emma's voice broke. The NDA says, the NDA is void if you testify under subpoena. Detective Bennett interrupted. You can't be sued for telling the truth in court. That's not how the law works. His family will destroy me. They have unlimited money. They'll ruin my life. They'll try, I said, speaking for the first time. My voice was still raspy from the strangulation damage, still broken. But I forced the words out. But I died on my kitchen floor and came back anyway. He tried to erase me and my daughter, and we're still here. If I can fight, Emma, you can too. Please, help me stop him before he does this to someone else. There was a long pause. I could hear Emma breathing, could almost feel her weighing the cost of silence against the cost of speaking. What do you need me to do? She finally whispered. The trial was scheduled for June 15th, exactly 3 months after Brandon tried to kill me. That gave us 2 months to prepare. 2 months for Brandon's lawyers to attack. 2 months for the Carter family to wage all-out war. They started with a countersuit filed on April 15th, full custody of Amelia Grace Anderson. The legal documents claimed I was mentally unstable, an unfit mother, a danger to my own child, and that Brandon, despite being charged with attempted murder, would provide a safer, more stable home. This is insane, Jenna said, reading the filing. He tried to kill you both, and they're claiming he's the safer parent. Their expert witness was Dr. Richard Morrison, a psychiatrist who'd never met me, but was willing to testify based on my decade-old therapy records and documented pattern of instability. Never mind that those records were from when I was 18, grieving my father's sudden death, dealing with normal adolescent trauma. Morrison had a reputation for being a hired gun. He'd testified in dozens of custody cases, always for whoever paid his $50,000 fee. The media circus intensified. Patricia Vance held a press conference on the courthouse steps, Brandon standing behind her looking wounded and concerned. My client is fighting for his daughter's safety, Vance said into a forest of microphones. Claire Anderson has made serious false accusations against a good man. She's attempted to poison his reputation, destroy his career, and now she's trying to prevent him from being a father. This is parental alienation of the worst kind. Mr. Carter loves his daughter. He wants to be part of her life. Is that so wrong? The comments online were vicious. She's keeping a man from his own child. Innocent until proven guilty. Why is he banned from seeing his daughter? Sounds like a vindictive ex using the baby as a weapon. Every day brought new attacks. Anonymous social media accounts dug up every photo of me from the past decade, twisting innocent moments into evidence of my instability. A picture of me crying at my father's funeral became evidence of mental fragility. A photo of me laughing with friends became manic behavior. A candid shot where I looked tired after a hospital shift became clear signs of substance abuse. Someone leaked photos of the safe house, not the exact address, but close enough that I felt exposed. The picture showed the driveway, the surrounding woods, enough detail that anyone determined enough could find us. I stopped sleeping. Every sound was Brandon. Every shadow was a threat. I'd check the locks 17 times before bed, then get up and check them again. My mother found me at 3 a.m. one night, standing by Amelia's bassinet. She'd been released from the NICU on April 20th, just staring at her, terrified that if I looked away for even a moment, something terrible would happen. You need to rest, my mother said gently, guiding me back to bed. You're going to make yourself sick. I can't let my guard down. That's when he'll strike. But I was falling apart. The stress, the sleeplessness, the constant fear it was destroying me from the inside. Ryan was there more often now. He'd bring dinner, sit with me during late-night feedings, hold Amelia while I pumped so I could feel like I had 2 hands free for 5 minutes. We didn't talk about what was happening between us, the growing connection, the way my heart rate steadied when he was around, the fact that he was the only man I'd felt safe with since before I met Brandon. Tell me about medical school, I said one night, desperate for distraction. We were sitting on the couch, Amelia asleep in my arms, the house quiet around us. I didn't go to medical school, just paramedic training. Why, you're clearly smart enough. He was quiet for a long moment. My Aunt Caroline died when I was 12. I watched my dad fall apart, watched him throw himself into advocacy work to cope with the grief. I wanted to do something immediate, something where I could make a difference right now. Not after years of school. Paramedics are first responders. We're the ones who show up when someone's heart stops, when someone's been hurt, when time is running out. We're the difference between life and death. You saved my life. You saved your own life by fighting. I just gave you the chance. The way he looked at me made something flutter in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, maybe, or the possibility of a future beyond survival. Jenna was working 18-hour days coordinating with prosecutor Nina Wells. Nina was a force of nature, 38 years old with a 92% conviction rate in domestic violence cases and a personal mission to put abusers behind bars. We have a strong case, Nina told me during a strategy session in early May. She'd come to the safe house, spreading documents across the kitchen table. Eyewitness testimony from Patricia Wilson, who watched him strangle you. Medical evidence from Dr. Foster documenting injuries consistent only with strangulation. Ryan's paramedic report showing you were clinically dead. Emma Richardson's testimony about the prior attack. Holly's evidence of family cover-ups. Your own testimony? This is overwhelming. But they're making me look crazy, I only said. My voice still raspy even after 6 weeks. Every day there's another article about how unstable I am. Let them, when you take that stand and show the jury your scars, when Emma Richardson sits in that witness box and tells her story, when Holly Carter, his own sister, testifies against him, the truth will be so loud their lies won't matter. What if it's not enough? Nina looked me directly in the eyes. Then we appeal, and we keep appealing, and we make so much noise that the system has to listen. But Claire, I don't think it's going to come to that. This case is solid. You're going to win. The week before trial, Victoria Carter gave one final interview. It ran on all the major networks during prime time. She looked elegant in pearls and a cream suit, every inch the concerned mother. Claire is a troubled young woman, Victoria said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. We tried to help her. We welcomed her into our family, supported her, loved her, but she has mental health issues that she refuses to address. She's paranoid, accusatory, pushing away everyone who tries to help. My son Brandon has been nothing but supportive. He stayed with her through her difficulties, tried to get her treatment, stood by her even when she became irrational. Now she's trying to destroy his life with these terrible, false accusations. It breaks my heart to see what she's doing to him. And to keep our granddaughter away from her father, it's cruel. I watched that interview with my mother. Jenna, Ryan, and Detective Bennett gathered in the living room. Holly was there too. She'd been living in a hotel, cut off from her family entirely, waiting to testify. She's good, Bennett said quietly. She knows exactly what she's doing. She's protecting a monster too, my mother spat. She paid Emma Richardson $200,000 to stay silent. She probably helped cover up Janet Carter's disappearance. And now she's sitting there playing the victim. That's what abusers do, Jenna said, her voice tight with anger. They recruit allies. They build narratives. They use money and power to rewrite reality. They're never the villain in their own story. I looked down at Amelia, sleeping peacefully in my arms. 10 weeks old now, getting stronger every day. She had my nose, Brandon's eyes, and a fierce determination that was all her own. When she cried, it sounded like a battle cry. When she looked at me, I saw someone who was going to grow up knowing her mother fought for her. Not this time, I said, my voice steady despite everything. This time, the truth wins. It has to. The trial began in 2 days. June 15th dawned gray and cold, rain spattering against the courthouse windows as I walked through security. Media vans lined the street. Protesters held signs, some supporting me, others calling me a liar. The whole thing felt surreal, like I was watching my own life from outside my body. I wore a simple navy dress, minimal makeup, my hair pulled back so the jury could see the fading scars on my neck. Amelia stayed with my mother at the safe house under police protection. There was no way I was bringing her into this circus. The courtroom was packed. Every seat filled with media, spectators, people who'd followed the case obsessively for 3 months. Brandon sat at the defense table in an expensive charcoal suit, looking every inch the successful banker wrongly accused. His parents sat in the front row behind him, Victoria dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. I sat at the prosecution table between Nina Wells and Detective Bennett. Ryan sat in the gallery directly behind me, close enough that I could feel his presence. Jenna sat beside him, ready to take notes and provide support. Holly sat alone on the other side of the courtroom, exiled from her own family, waiting to testify against her brother. Judge Sandra Martinez entered, a woman in her mid-60s with steel gray hair and a reputation for running a tight courtroom. She'd presided over dozens of domestic violence cases and had no patience for theatrics. "This is a criminal trial," she said sternly, looking around the courtroom. "I will not tolerate outbursts, commentary, or disruption. Anyone who cannot remain silent and respectful will be removed. Is that clear?" Everyone nodded. Prosecutor Nina Wells stood to deliver her opening statement. She walked to the jury box, making eye contact with each of the 12 jurors. On March 15th of this year, Claire Anderson died. Her heart stopped beating for 4 minutes and 17 seconds while her husband strangled her on their kitchen floor. She was 7 months pregnant with their daughter. She had just discovered that her husband was embezzling $2.3 million from clients and planning to flee the country the next morning, abandoning her and their unborn child to face the consequences of his crimes. So he tried to murder her. He wrapped his hands around her throat and squeezed until her heart stopped. He almost succeeded. Claire Anderson flatlined that night. But she came back, and now she's here to tell you exactly what kind of man Brandon Carter really is. Several jurors looked at Brandon with expressions ranging from skepticism to outright disgust. Patricia Vance stood for the defense, impeccably dressed, perfectly coiffed, radiating expensive confidence. This case is about a troubled woman who has struggled with mental health issues for years, a woman whose pregnancy was high risk and difficult, whose hormones were imbalanced, whose grip on reality became increasingly tenuous. Brandon Carter loved his wife. He supported her through her difficulties. He tried to help her, and when she spiraled into paranoia and made wild accusations about him, claiming he was stealing money and planning to leave, none of which is true, by the way she attacked him, he defended himself. It was a tragic accident that my client deeply regrets, but it was not attempted murder. It was not premeditated violence. It was a desperate woman in crisis, lashing out at a man trying to help her. And now she's trying to destroy his life to cover her own instability. The battle lines were drawn. The first witness was Patricia Wilson, my 72-year-old neighbor. She walked slowly to the stand, her hands shaking slightly, but her voice was steady. "I was washing dishes in my kitchen around 9:50 p.m., Patricia testified. "I have a clear view into the Carter's kitchen through our windows. I saw Brandon grab Claire by the throat. She struggled, clawing at his hands. He held on. I watched for what felt like forever, probably 30 or 40 seconds, before I could make myself move, make myself call 911. By the time I dialed, Claire wasn't moving anymore. She just went limp." Vance tried to discredit her on cross-examination. "Mrs. Wilson, you were looking through 2 windows at night. How can you be certain of what you saw?" "I've lived in that house for 40 years, Patricia said firmly. "I know what I saw, and I'll never forget the look on his face. Cold, calculated. That wasn't a man defending himself. That was murder." Margaret Foster testified next, presenting medical evidence with clinical precision. "These injuries are consistent with a manual strangulation," Dr. Foster explained, displaying photographs that made several jurors wince. "Bilateral petechial hemorrhaging, that means broken blood vessels in the eyes, thyroid cartilage damage, finger pattern bruising on the anterior neck. A fall downstairs does not produce this pattern. These injuries required sustained pressure for several minutes. Ms. Anderson was strangled until her heart stopped beating." Ryan Hayes testified about finding me clinically dead, about the resuscitation efforts, about Brandon's strange behavior. "In my 10 years as a paramedic, I've responded to hundreds of emergencies," Ryan said. "When someone genuinely believes their loved one is dying, there's panic, desperation. They're asking us to save them, to hurry, to do something." Mr. Carter seemed more concerned with maintaining his story about his wife falling down the stairs than with whether she would survive. When I told him she was in cardiac arrest, his reaction was muted, almost relieved. Then came Emma Richardson. She walked to the stand wearing a simple gray dress, no jewelry, her face pale but determined. When she placed her hand on the Bible to swear to tell the truth, I saw her hand trembling. Nina Wells approached gently. Ms. Richardson, can you tell us about your relationship with the defendant? I dated Brandon Carter 8 years ago. We met in college. He was charming, intelligent, seemed perfect. Then I discovered he was stealing from our fraternity's charity fund money that was supposed to go to underprivileged children. When I confronted him about it, he strangled me. The courtroom went silent. Can you describe what happened? Emma's voice shook, but she kept going. He grabbed my throat with both hands. He squeezed. I tried to fight back, but he was stronger. I passed out. I was dead for 3 minutes and 47 seconds. The paramedics revived me, just like they revived Claire. What happened after that? His family paid me $200,000 to sign a non-disclosure agreement and never speak about it. They told me if I violated the NDA, they would sue me for everything I had and would ever have. I was 24 years old, terrified. I took the money and moved across the country. Vance's cross-examination was brutal. You took money to keep quiet about an alleged assault. That sounds like extortion, not victimhood. Emma looked directly at Brandon for the first time. I was a college student going up against a family with unlimited resources and no conscience. Taking that money felt like my only chance to survive. But I've regretted it every single day since, because I knew he'd do it again. And he did, to Claire. The jury looked at Brandon with open hostility now. Holly Carter testified next, bringing documents that showed the family pattern of violence and cover-ups. She cried through her entire testimony, but she didn't back down. My family has been covering up violence against women for 3 generations. Holly said, they paid Emma to disappear. They covered up my father's domestic violence incidents in the Army. My father's first wife, Brandon's biological mother, disappeared 30 years ago under suspicious circumstances, and my family never looked for her. I can't be part of this anymore. I won't. Victoria Carter stood up in the gallery. How dare you? Judge Martinez's gavel came down hard. One more outburst, and you will be removed from this courtroom. Sit down. Victoria sat, but the rage on her face was unmistakable. Finally, it was my turn. Walking to the witness stand felt like walking through water. Every eye in that courtroom was on me. Brandon's gaze especially cold, calculating, daring me to tell the truth. I placed my hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. The whole truth. Nothing but the truth. Then I sat down, adjusted the microphone, and looked directly at the jury. Nina Wells approached with a gentle expression. Miss Anderson, can you tell us how you met the defendant? I told them everything. The charity gala, the whirlwind romance, the gradual isolation from friends and family, the escalating abuse, the night I found evidence of embezzlement and confronted him, the moment his hands closed around my throat. I died that night. I said, my voice steady despite the tears streaming down my face. I was dead for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I felt my heart stop. I felt my baby stop moving inside me. I thought we were both gone. The only reason I'm here is because my neighbor called 911 and because a paramedic refused to give up on me. Nina let that sit for a moment. Why didn't you leave sooner? Because leaving is when you're in the most danger. I knew the statistics. I was an ICU nurse. I'd treated women who'd been hurt when they tried to leave, and I was right to be afraid. The day I finally confronted him, the day I tried to stand up for myself and my baby, he tried to murder me. Patricia Vance's cross-examination was everything I expected. She attacked my therapy records, my decision to quit nursing, my friendships, every choice I'd made in the past 5 years. If he was really abusive, why did you stay? She finally asked. The question designed to trap me. I took a deep breath. Because leaving is when he tried to kill me. Because I had no money, he controlled all our finances. I had no job, he'd convinced me to quit. I had nowhere to go, he'd systematically cut me off from everyone who cared about me. His family has unlimited resources, and I had nothing. The last woman who confronted him got paid $200,000 to disappear and sign an NDA. I knew if I tried to leave, he'd either kill me or destroy me. I was right about all of it. I stood up slowly and pulled down the collar of my dress. The strangulation scars were still visible, faded but unmistakable. "These are his handprints," I said, my voice breaking. He held me down on our kitchen floor and squeezed until my heart stopped, until I died. The only reason I'm alive is because someone saw and called for police help. The only reason my daughter is alive is because paramedics fought to save us both. I looked at the jury, meeting each person's eyes. He tried to erase us. He tried to make it look like an accident. And when that didn't work, his family tried to make me look crazy so no one would believe me. But I'm here. My daughter is here. We survived. And I'm asking you to make sure he can never do this to anyone else. There wasn't a sound in that courtroom. The jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 of the longest days of my life. 3 days of waiting, pacing, barely eating, running through every possible outcome in my mind. On June 23rd at 2:47 p.m., my phone rang. Nina's voice was tight with emotion. "The jury has reached a verdict. We need to get to the courthouse now." The courtroom filled quickly. Brandon sat at the defense table looking confident, like he already knew he'd won. His parents sat behind him. Victoria with that same sympathetic expression she'd worn throughout the trial. I sat at the prosecution table with my hands clenched so tight my nails drew blood. Judge Martinez entered. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The jury foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor. On the count of attempted murder in the first degree, how do you find some? We find the defendant guilty." The courtroom erupted. Victoria Carter let out a wail. Brandon's face went white. I collapsed forward, my head in my hands, sobbing with relief. "On the count of assault with intent to kill T. Guilty. On the count of domestic violence with a deadly weapon. Guilty. Guilty on all counts." Judge Martinez gavelled for order. "The defendant will be remanded into custody immediately pending sentencing." As the bailiffs put Brandon in handcuffs, he turned to look at me one last time. His face was twisted with rage. All pretense of the wounded husband minby. He mouthed something I couldn't make out all the words. But I caught "not over." I mouthed back, "Yes, it is." The sentencing hearing happened 2 weeks later. Judge Martinez looked at Brandon with open contempt. "Mr. Carter, you attempted to murder your pregnant wife when she discovered your criminal activities. You strangled her until her heart stopped. You then attempted to cover up your crime and destroy her reputation. You show no remorse. You are a danger to society and to women in particular. I hereby sentence you to 25 years in prison with no possibility of parole for 20 years. Additionally, you will face federal charges for embezzlement. You will never have contact with your daughter. Take him away." As they led Brandon out, I finally allowed myself to breathe. It was over. It was really over. 6 months later, I stood at a podium in a hotel ballroom addressing 200 people at a domestic violence awareness conference. Amelia was 11 months old now, healthy and thriving, sitting with my mother in the front row, making babbling sounds that occasionally interrupted my speech. People ask why I didn't leave sooner, I told the crowd, my voice strong now. The truth is, I did leave the day I confronted him, and he tried to murder me for it. Leaving is the most dangerous time. I was dead for 4 minutes because I chose myself and my daughter over his secrets. I paused, looking around the room. But I came back. My neighbor Patricia called 911 even though she was terrified. Detective Laura Bennett believed me when others doubted. My mother and my best friend Jenna stood by me through everything. Brandon's own sister Holly chose truth over family loyalty and testified against him. I pulled out a piece of paper with statistics. Every day in America, 3 women are murdered by their current or former partners. If your partner has strangled you, you are 750% more likely to be murdered by them. Those aren't just numbers. Those are daughters, mothers, sisters, friends. My voice cracked slightly. If you're in an abusive relationship right now, please know this, it's not your fault. You didn't cause it. You can't fix it. The abuse will escalate. The National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-7233, is available 24 hours a day. They will believe you. They will help you. I gripped the podium. And if you suspect someone you love is being abused, speak up. My neighbor saved my life by calling 911. She didn't ignore what she saw. She acted. And because of her, I'm standing here today. The audience broke into applause. I died that night, but the woman who came back is stronger than Brandon Carter ever let me be. Stronger than his family's money. Stronger than their lives. I came back angry and determined and unwilling to be silent. And if my story can save even one woman, then it all meant something. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. After the speech, Ryan was waiting at the back of the room, still in his paramedic uniform, holding white roses. "You were amazing," he said. "I was terrified. You were brave. There's a difference." We'd been dating for 2 months now, taking it slowly, both healing, but we were building something real on honesty and respect. "Ready to go home?" he asked. Home, my small apartment, modest but mine. It had a nursery where Amelia slept peacefully. It had a kitchen where I cooked without fear. It had locks I only checked once. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Let's go home." That night, after Amelia was asleep and Ryan had left for his shift, I stood in my daughter's doorway, watching her breathe. Steady, strong, alive. She was beautiful. Dark hair, blue eyes, a determined little chin. She laughed at everything, silly faces. Peekaboo, the neighbor's cat. She had no idea what she'd survived. Someday I'd tell her. I'd tell her about the violence, about the trial, about how everyone fought to keep us safe. I'd tell her that leaving an abuser is the bravest thing you can do. But for now, she was just a baby. Safe, loved, free. I checked the front door lock once. Just once, and then I went to bed. My phone buzzed with texts. "Jenna, you killed it tonight. So proud of you." My mother. "Your father would be so proud." I know I am. "Holly, thank you for letting me be part of your story. It saved me too." Ryan. "Some people are worth fighting for. You're one of them." I smiled, set my phone down, and closed my eyes. For the first time in 6 years, I felt at peace. Brandon was in prison, where he'd stay for at least 20 years. Nina was confident his appeals would fail. I'd started taking online classes to renew my nursing license. I wanted to work with domestic violence survivors in hospitals. I wanted to be the nurse who recognized the signs, who asked the right questions, who helped women escape before it was too late. I'd also started a small nonprofit with money from selling my story. The Claire Anderson Foundation provided financial assistance to domestic violence survivors' security deposits, lawyers, childcare, whatever they needed to start over. Holly ran it with me. My life wasn't perfect. I still had nightmares. I still had moments of anxiety. I still couldn't watch certain movies without being transported back to that kitchen floor. But I was alive. My daughter was alive. And we were free. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about that night, March 15th, 9:52 p.m., the moment my heart stopped. 4 minutes of darkness. 4 minutes of death. 4 minutes that changed everything. I'd died on that kitchen floor, but I'd been reborn too. And the woman who came back, the survivor, the mother, the advocate, the fighter, she was someone Brandon Carter never could have predicted. Someone his mother's money couldn't silence. Someone who refused to disappear quietly. I was Claire Anderson, mother, survivor, voice for the voiceless, and I wasn't done fighting yet.